I am an educator scientist, and I believe that we have to change the way we teach at a faster pace than we update the content of what we teach. And the reason is because we have to meet the needs of a changing student population, and we have to meet the cultural challenges of today. And the biggest cultural challenge we have right now is gaslighting and fake news. It pervades our society. But gaslighting and fake news is not new. It's been pervasive in the sciences for a long time now. And here are some examples. For example, vaccines do not cause autism. And today it was reported that over 600 cases of the measles are in the US that are easily preventable. This is a myth. Because of that myth, parents are not vaccinating their children. In the Midwest this year, we saw massive historic floodings. We saw horrendous fires in California and extreme storms on both coasts. This is not the result of regular cycles of our planet. This is a result of human activity that's causing climate change. And finally, evolution is a theory, and it has been proven over and over again, which is good to know. So, the question I have is, how do I teach my students to think critically, to identify fake news, and also to build a sense of agency in them? So I'm going to tell you a story about how I changed my teaching to do this. Now, I changed my teaching as a result of the 2016 presidential election. And the data that came out of the election was really surprising to me. First of all, the students that I teach, that I love, and that I know are really passionate about things in the world, showed up. Less than 50% of that population came out to vote, of the 18 and 29-year-olds. Compared to the baby boomers that are 65 and older, they showed up at a rate of 70%. And even more surprising was the fact that millennials today the numbers of millennials that have reached voting age now match those baby boomers. So where are they, and why do they not feel a sense of agency and determination? I turn to John Dewey, who is the teacher of all teachers, and he taught us that in order for a democracy to work well, its citizens have to be informed participants in this process. So as an educator, I asked myself, so how do I get my students to think critically and to identify fake news? And as a scientist, I wanted to ask myself, how do I generate agency in students? How can I motivate them to reach their full power and potential out there? Now, this past fall, we had the midterm elections, and I was slated to teach introductory biology to 44 bright young minds. And I saw this as an opportunity to change my teaching. So I designed a project that I thought and hoped would promote student agency and critical thinking at the same time. So let me tell you a little bit about this project. It lasted the entire term, and I asked the students to go to the state government websites of their home state and identify a legislative bill that had something to do with science. It was very broadly defined, so they would have a chance to identify something that spoke to them. Each student studied their legislative bill, and they had to learn who wrote it, who is sponsoring the bill, who would the bill benefit, what was the science behind the bill, and did the bill actually articulate the science correctly. And their research they shared on a weekly basis through online blogs, and their peers read their blogs posts and gave them feedback on this, so they would have a chance to go back and do further research. Finally, I had the students transfer their knowledge by writing op-ed pieces. And these op-ed pieces were then shared with their peers for feedback, revised, and on the last day of the project, I brought in bagels, and we had a big submission party. There were 43 submissions that were made to local newspapers across the country. The result is that within 10 days, we had 7 online publications. This is only an example of 5 of them. And if you can see here, the students picked topics that really interested them. A few of them picked topics that were related to fighting the opioid crisis happening in our country right now. There were many students with ailing grandparents who picked topics about elder care, dementia care, and Alzheimer's. Other students picked topics about how do you fund research for sickle cell anemia, for example. And these articles were published in 3 different states: Colorado, New York, and Massachusetts. I have to say this was a little bit more successful than I anticipated, but especially what was a surprise to me is that because the students had picked legislative bills from their home states and were submitting to their hometown newspapers, this created a context and authenticity that really spoke to them and gave them a purpose of learning that I didn't realize how meaningful that was going to be to them. I gave them a post-class survey, and I wanted to hear how this project had gone, and I found that science literacy increased. 77% of the students identified that they felt that their writing had improved over time, and 100% of the students said that over the course of the term it had become easier to write. I also found that student agency had increased. 71% of the students reported that they were more likely to vote in the next election. And if you remember, baby boomers were appearing at 70% in that original US Census graph I showed. So I feel that my 10-week experiment to fight fake news worked. These students were genuinely interested in their topics. They put everything into it. They learned critical thinking in a context that was authentic to them. And they really took a lot of pride in their work, and they showed me that they can build agency, and we can continue to do this. We are the people, we are the government, and it's our duty as educators and scientists to inoculate our students against fake news and to save our democracy. Thank you.